Welcome to the Future of Payroll and Workforce Management Insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com, where I am Brent Skinner. I was Brent Skinner before HR.com, joining HR.com, but my name is Brent Skinner, and at HR.com, and I am executive community leader for Future of Payroll, and I do several other things. But this is not about me. This is about my guest. Welcome, Jocelyn. This is Jocelyn King, CEO and founder of VirgilHR.
Brent, thank you so much for having me.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for agreeing to join me for this episode of the podcast. We've had many conversations in the past. We've met IRL at some of the events in this space, and it's been really interesting. We always have very interesting conversations, and I want to learn a little bit more today. We have a really interesting sort of meta topic planned. We're going to be talking about the impact of tech readiness, tech implementation and adoption, and change management even on compliance in HR, which is just really fascinating and in my humble opinion. But first, as I like to ask all my guests, there's a lot of passion in this space, especially among founders in this space, and I like to ask all my guests, what got you into the world of work? Maybe you fell into it or whatever, but what made you stay and get really excited about it, Jocelyn?
Yeah, so I think it all started with my first job. It was at my first job in HR. It was at Target. I had just graduated college. I was a philosophy major, Brent. I had no clue what I wanted to do. And they recruited me and put me in an HR manager role. And I learned so much, so many best practices, processes, just experiences that are really hard to get elsewhere, particularly in employee relations, performance and talent management. Um, and I loved it. I think really what made me so passionate, and I'm not alone in saying this, is the people and the difference that you get to make in their lives. More people are at work often than at home. And so if you can improve their lives at work, enrich it, really make them feel like they serve a great purpose, and there's a mission behind what they do, and they feel engaged and they feel like their employer in turn is really investing in them, then you're doing a great job. And that's really what gets me up every morning.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. And that is really a good feeling. It absolutely is. I didn't know what I wanted to do either when I was in college. I was a music major. So there you go. Not doing anything music related now except karaoke sometimes. Um, uh, so I'm looking forward to this topic. So just to set the stage again, um, we're talking about compliance because Virgil HR is very much about compliance. And feel free to share with our audience what you do at Virgil HR, and that might be a nice sort of segue into this discussion we have planned.
Sure. Well, I'll kind of explain a little backstory on how Virgil HR even came to be. So I was at the time running HR for a global company that had started expanding into North and South America. So that was my jurisdiction. And we were hiring so quickly in many states, in many Canadian provinces, et cetera. And it was really hard tracking and complying with employment and labor laws, particularly at the state and local level. So Google's our best friend, Google's our worst enemy. We're talking to lawyers. Like, it's just very time consuming and expensive. And I thought, compliance is not well served technologically in the HR space. There isn't a whole lot of tech in compliance today, and there needs to be because compliance is a very administrative function in nature. There's certainly strategy behind it, but the day to day, very administrative in nature. There should be technology that can help automate it for HR professionals. So I quit my job. I started Virgil HR about 4 years ago, and that was my mission: was to build out a product that would automate compliance and give HR teams time back so they could focus more on people and people strategy. So, what does Virgil HR do essentially? Well, we have a lot of different feature sets. We first started off with our chatbot. So, we were actually well before the introduction of ChatGPT. We introduced a chatbot that actually is quite smart. So it will ask diagnostic questions. It does a legal analysis to determine what laws apply to a specific employee, and then it provides prescriptive guidance. So let's say, for example, you have an employee in California requesting maternity leave. If you've never dealt with that before, good luck. That's hours on Google. And you just ask that question to the bot. The bot, in turn, asks those diagnostic questions, does the analysis, and then says, hey, based on everything that you've provided me, these are all the steps you need to take, all the paperwork that needs to be provided, the notices that you need to give to the employee, when they need to be given to the employee by. So it might have taken hours of research, now takes minutes with the bot. And then we expanded our product to include other features like our handbook builder, which has a lot of automation attached to it, our legal updates and task automation features. So if Kentucky increases their minimum wage, rather than you having to know, oh, there's a notice or a poster that I have to provide my Kentucky employees, we create those tasks for you and attach those digital copies of posters so that it's a very quick, easy thing that you can do.
Mm.
And then we kind of continued to build out the product with resources, the ability to speak to a lawyer. We just released our salary benchmarking tool in collaboration with PayScale last week. And next month, we're introducing our LMS, which will have all mandatory compliance trainings and about 700 other professional development and soft skills trainings as well.
Oh, that's very interesting. Pretty comprehensive. Um, you talked about Google and how that can be a real rabbit hole and a time suck, I guess, what you're saying, really for folks that are trying to figure something out. And it made me think of ChatGPT, which is, and you mentioned your AI tool, your AI tool. Um, that's it. I guess we were going to talk about AI. It was inevitable, but it's all. We would almost be disappointed if we didn't get to AI in an HR related podcast these days. But in any event, maybe talk a little bit more about that tech readiness piece of it. Being ready for, because it's you can go out there and just ask ChatGPT a compliance question, for example, and it'll spit something back to you, and then or you can just put in a search engine and say use AI mode, any search engine you use, and it'll spit back sort of an AI summary, and they'll give you the background stuff to check out. And people are busy and in a hurry, and how many people check that stuff? What's going on here? What do people need to be sort of aware of and leery of?
Oh gosh. Well, I think there are kind of two buckets here. There's tech and then there's AI. And obviously you should be combining the two, right? But it is very different. So when you're looking at, your standard tech product, no AI included, there's a little bit of a different way that you would be vetting it compared to AI. AI, you must be more discretionary, and you really need to bring, I think, more stakeholders to the table when you're evaluating a tool like that. And the reason why is because, as so many of you know, there's a lot of risk involved, especially risk around algorithmic bias, and simply the fact that it could be providing the wrong answer to you. When we created our chatbot, we actually didn't use AI. We had attorneys program the bot using logic. So the conversations you have with our bot are built by lawyers. And that was
Mhm.
very intentional because you do need to be very, very careful about, as a technology provider, you have to be very careful about how you leverage AI in your tool, especially for the HR community. So when you are an HR leader and you're vetting these types of technologies, you'll want to include your CTO, you'll want to include your CISO or whoever handles kind of data cybersecurity for you. And from a change management perspective, you'll also want to include stakeholders at every level of the organization, from the vetting process all the way through implementation and then beyond, right, as we go into adoption.
Mm.
And that's really important, Brett. So I think that, you know, something that HR needs to be just very cautious of as they're going through this is, okay, we're seeing more and more laws come out now. about AI. And we need to figure out, okay, they're state specific. Now we have this executive order. This is a very confusing time right now. What are we, really supposed to do? What are we required to do? So educating yourself on whatever legal requirements apply to you based on where your employees are working or where your candidates might be from a recruitment perspective is going to be really critical to that vetting process.
That's really interesting, and we're getting a little bit into that change management as
Mhm.
well, right? In terms of involving stakeholders. If you're an HR department, and your compliance is is tough. And I don't mean that the regulatory landscape is tough, although it might be, right? But you're just finding it difficult, a real challenge to get compliance right. You're spending way too much time on it. You don't know maybe if you're compliant at any given time, although no organization is really going to admit that this happens a lot, right? Um, if you're in that kind of a situation, where's where should you where should you start in terms of fixing it? What's ground zero in terms of getting your compliance right in HR?
Oh gosh. Well, it depends on whether something has happened or whether you're just being proactive, right? So if you're being reactive, you're obviously addressing the issue at hand first and then doing an audit. If you're being proactive, I always recommend you start off straight off the bat with an audit. We actually have a compliance audit tool in our product, but essentially, what you want to do in this audit, whether you're using our tool, someone else's tool, or just on your own, is taking a look at the full life cycle of the employee and all the different ways HR interfaces. So it could be, classification audits when you are looking to open a role, like should a role be exempt or non-exempt. It can be record retention. It could be, are you paying final wages in time? There's a wide variety of things that you want to look at when you're doing an audit. And once you've completed that audit, in our case with Virgil, it'll kind of spit out a report. It'll say, hey, here are your areas of risk based on what you've shared with us. And then here's an action report on what you can do to mitigate that risk. So if you don't have a tool like that, you'd identify that for yourself and then create that action plan, of course. So the audit is the number one place that you start, Brent, at all times, in my opinion, when you are taking a look at something like that. And then from there, once you've created your action plan, you can execute against that.
Okay. It makes a lot of sense to put together to audit the employee life cycle and all the potential compliance related incidents or intersections with
Mhm.
compliance stuff, right? So that because there's a lot going on that you might not. You see, a lot of HR departments, from what I understand, it's whether it's any kind of process, not even necessarily compliance. A lot of it is in their head, right? It's not necessarily documented down there, in a computer in some sort of a PDF file or whatever it is, so everybody can kind of look at it and everybody's operating from the same hymn book, I guess, right? Um, and so that really is an important process to kind of just figure out what the actual workflow is, what is our actual environment, or what is our operational environment, what's going on here. And from there, what I'm hearing is that once you've sort of taxonomized that, I hope I used that word correctly, um, then you can figure out, okay, here and there is where we actually need to get this or that solution to help us remain compliant and that sort of stuff. When it comes to technology, and I um, aside from what virtual HR provides, in addition, um, when someone's looking at sort of, you know, uh, adopting technology to help with their compliance, uh, what are some of the things to think about?
Well, there are a few things, and that's a great question because a lot of people just think about the tech side of things and not necessarily the content.
Mm.
And the content is very important. So when you're looking at compliance, in this case, let's use employment and labor law compliance. There are a few things that you want to take into consideration beyond what we've already talked about when it comes to things like security and liability. And that's going to be the type of content in the tool itself. How broad is the content? How in depth does it go into legislation? Does it cover state law? Does it cover local law? Covering local law is really important. If you have an employee in San Francisco who's said, "Hey, I need to go on maternity leave," and you only follow California law because you're only getting state information, but there's these laws in San Francisco that you have to comply with that you know nothing about, you can get into quite a bit of trouble. So making sure that it covers breadth is really, really critical. And then you also want to take a look at the different feature sets. What is it that's important for your organization from a strategic perspective? So by this, I mean, let's say, for example, handbooks. Handbooks are a really big pain point for your organization. You are expanding a lot into multiple states, kind of like how I was at that company before starting Virgil. You're
Mm.
expanding a lot into multiple states. You can't even keep up with the state addenda for those states. And you just really need a tool that can help you, right? So you might want to look for a tool that not only has that state coverage, but also has automation capabilities like when legislation changes in one of those states or localities, the system will auto push new policies or updated policies straight into your handbook. So you don't even have to think about it and notifies you. You know you have this nice up to date handbook, not that once a year review or once every 2-year review that you do with your lawyer. So think about what aligns with your strategy. It could be whistleblowing and you want an anonymous reporting hotline. It could be learning and you want something that's going to automate training for you. But that's really what you want to take a look at is how it aligns with the needs of your business and making sure that it has the feature sets that are appropriate for you all.
Once or twice a year review with your lawyer sounds like a quaint notion these days when it
Oh,
comes to.
I think I said, I hope I said once every year or two.
Oh, every
I
year or
think,
2, okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was being a little generous. I don't think it really happens that often for most companies, to be honest.
That's I can't imagine. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. Is regulatory change, is the pace of regulatory change, increasing?
Um, I I haven't really noticed that it's increasing from one year to another. What I've noticed is that consistently it's changing all the time. So we actually update our product daily. We're constantly tracking these laws as they change. And our legal team is literally posting an update almost every day. I
Right.
think there are over 400 laws a year on average that are introduced. So, that's more than one law a day. That's quite a bit. What gets to be quite obvious as you go through this is the cadence in which these pass or go into effect. Actually, less so on when they pass, more on when they go into effect. We have so many laws going into effect January 1st. I actually asked the team to put a list together because we wanted to create a little material that we could provide to people, just kind of preparing them for this January 1 change. And there were too many to put on the list. We had to pick and choose what we were going to put on there. So there's more of a cadence around that. And I'll tell you, last year's list was nowhere near as long as this year's list. So I don't know if it's like a cadence thing on when these laws are going into effect, but I've certainly noticed that difference. The collective volume, however, seems to be relatively consistent.
What kind of an organization do you need to be able to sort of just monitor and do this all yours is there is there even such an organization that can kinda do this just to handle this all in-house or.
Yeah, I'd say that enterprise organizations that have large legal teams, if they've assigned an attorney who's responsible solely for this, then yes, they could do that. Or there are some organizations like PEOs, for example, that have to stay ahead of the game with this kind of stuff. So they have internal teams solely focused on that. And I'm sure they're sharing that with their internal organization as well. But if you are a mid-size or a smaller organization, the likelihood that you're going to be able to afford a dedicated resource and also afford all the software that comes with it for legislative tracking is much lower. And so that's kind of where we come in. Is we generally tend to service more of those mid market and small business companies that don't have a resource like that available to them. But I will say, even with the enterprise companies, Brent, you know, things can sometimes move slowly. And
Mhm.
so we do have customers that come from enterprise organizations because their legal teams can't keep up and they're just
And
not moving fast enough for what they need. So that does happen.
that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. It's it's not efficient, to try to do this all yourself, especially if you're a smaller organization, and especially with, smaller companies where there's you still have accidental HR people, who are trying to do all that stuff, while running the business, which is,
Yeah.
really, can get really hairy. Um this has been a very, very illuminating conversation. Lots to think about, and I'm sure I know we've only scratched the surface, but we're at about a 20-minute long podcast, so we're we're right up there now. Um, thank you so much, Jocelyn, for joining me today for this episode.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I always get excited when I hear from you, Brent, because there's always something interesting cooking in your world.
Thank you very much. Likewise, likewise. Have a wonderful holiday. This will be live after the holidays for the audience here, but we're talking right ahead of the holidays. So happy holidays, Jocelyn.
Same to you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at HR.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.